In the forgotten corners of the Thai countryside, where palm forests swallow the horizon and the earth holds memories older than prayer, there are villages that do not appear on maps. Places where silence is not peace, but obedience. Where rain does not fall by season, but by promise. And where the soil remembers every life ever given to keep it breathing. This is the story of Ban Sang, and the ancient offering that was never meant to end. Chapter 1. The Village Without a Name. The road into Ban Sang narrowed until it became little more than a scar of red dirt cutting through an ocean of dry palms. The driver refused to go farther. His tuk-tuk rattled to a stop beneath a leaning tamarind tree. Its branches twisted like arthritic fingers clawing at the dimming sky. "This is far enough," he muttered. Naren stepped down, his boots sinking slightly into powdery soil the color of dried blood. The air felt wrong, thick, unmoving, as if the wind had abandoned the place years ago. Even the insects seemed reluctant to sing. "You'll still be here when I return tomorrow?" Naren asked. The driver did not meet his eyes. "If you stay after sunset," the man said, voice barely above a whisper. "You may not want to leave, or you may not be able to." Before Naren could respond, the engine sputtered back to life and the tuk-tuk lurched away, leaving behind a trail of dust that hung in the air far longer than it should have. Ahead stood a weathered wooden arch marking the entrance to the village. No name was carved into it, only faded red cloth strips tied in knots, fluttering weakly despite the stillness. Some were so old they had darkened to brown, stiff like dried flesh. Naren lifted his camera but hesitated. The silence pressed against his ears until he could hear his own pulse. He stepped beneath the arch. Immediately, the temperature seemed to drop. Ban Sang revealed itself in fragments, stilt houses leaning at uneasy angles, woven bamboo walls patched with mismatched boards, and narrow footpaths winding between them like veins beneath thin skin. No voices greeted him, no children ran, no dogs barked. Yet doors moved. Not opened, only swayed slightly, as though someone had just withdrawn into the shadows. A faint smell drifted through the air, incense mixed with something sour and metallic. Naren followed the path deeper into the village. He noticed small spirit shrines placed at nearly every doorway. Each was cluttered with offerings, wilted marigolds, bowls of rice turned gray with rot, and sticks of incense burned down to black stubs. But beneath the familiar tokens lay stranger objects, coils of animal bone, tiny cloth bundles tied with hair, and clay figures without faces. At the center clearing stood a well, its circular stone lip darkened by years of moisture. A wooden lid covered it, secured by thick rope. Red handprints marked the surface, some faded, some fresh. He reached out to touch one. The wood felt cold. Not cool, cold, as if the sun had never touched it. A creaking sound echoed behind him. Naren turned quickly. A house door at the edge of the clearing swung shut on its own. The silence returned, heavier than before. From somewhere deep within the cluster of houses came a sound, not quite a voice. Not quite wind, a low murmur, like many people whispering beneath layers of earth. Naren swallowed, adjusting the strap of his bag. He told himself it was only the sound of air moving through hollow wood. The echo of an unfamiliar place playing tricks on his senses. Yet as he walked on, he could not shake the sensation that the village was listening. Not watching. Listening. Waiting for something it had been promised long ago. And as the last light of evening sank behind the palms, Ban Sang seemed to draw a slow, breathless inhale, as though the land itself had just awakened. Chapter 2. The Old Woman's Warning. Naren did not remember deciding to follow the narrow path that led away from the well. It felt as if the village itself guided his steps, turning him left, then right, deeper into the silent maze of stilt houses and shadowed verandas. The smell of incense grew stronger. Not fresh incense, but the stale, suffocating scent of ashes that had burned for too many years. He found her seated beneath a sagging awning beside a house whose wood had darkened almost black with age. A low table stood before her, crowded with bundles of incense, cracked ceramic bowls, and amulets strung on cords the color of dried rust. The old woman did not look up when he approached. Her fingers moved slowly, threading thin sticks of incense into neat bundles. Each motion was precise, ritualistic, the movements of someone who had repeated the same task for decades. "Are you selling these?" Naren asked gently in Thai. The woman stopped. Silence gathered around them like damp cloth. Then she spoke. "You should not have come." Her voice sounded dry, as if it had traveled a long distance through dust before reaching his ears. Naren shifted his weight. "I'm researching local rituals. I heard this village preserves traditions older than most." At that, she lifted her head. Her eyes were clouded with age, yet disturbingly focused, as if they were looking not at him, but through him. "What you call tradition," she whispered, "is a debt." A slow breeze moved through the lane, stirring the hanging strips of cloth tied to nearby doorways. They fluttered weakly, releasing faint whispers of fabric rubbing against wood. Naren crouched slightly to meet her gaze. "What kind of debt?" The old woman studied him for a long moment. The air thickened, pressing against his lungs. Then she reached beneath the table and placed something in his hand. It was a small clay amulet, cold and damp. Its surface bore the crude shape of a horned figure, not carved with care, but gouged, as though made in fear. "Keep it hidden," she murmured. "If they see it, they will know you have been warned." "Warned about what?" Her gaze drifted toward the end of the lane, where the path dissolved into dense palm shadows. "Have you heard of the ancient offering?" Naren shook his head. The old woman leaned closer. He could smell herbs, smoke, and something bitter on her breath. "It is not a ceremony," she said. "It is a promise made to something that does not forgive." A dull thud echoed from somewhere deeper in the village. Then another. Naren realized, with a tightening in his chest, that it was the sound of wooden shutters closing. One by one. Without voices. Without footsteps. The old woman's fingers tightened around his wrist with surprising strength. "When the drums begin," she whispered, "do not follow them." A long pause. Her grip loosened. "And if you hear someone calling your name from the forest." Her eyes lifted slowly to meet his. "You must not answer." A shadow passed across the lane, though no cloud crossed the sky. When Naren looked down at the amulet again, he noticed something dark embedded in the clay grooves. It was not paint. It had the dull, brown-black sheen of old blood. He looked up to ask another question. The old woman had returned to bundling incense. As if he had never been there. Behind him, somewhere deep within Bansang, a hollow sound echoed faintly through the still air. Like a drum tested once, and waiting.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 3. The Sealed Temple. Naren found the temple at the heart of Bansang not by sight, but by absence. The path leading toward it was unnaturally clear, as if even fallen leaves avoided settling there. Houses stood farther apart, their doors shut tight, their windows covered from the inside with cloth darkened by age and smoke. No offerings rested outside these homes. No spirit shrines guarded their thresholds. Even the air felt stripped of scent. He knew he was close when the insects stopped. The silence ahead was not natural silence. It was the kind that pressed against the ears until sound itself seemed forbidden. The temple rose from the earth like something that had been unearthed rather than built. Black stone blocks, slick with age and moss, formed a squat structure whose surfaces seemed to absorb the fading light. Unlike the bright gilded temples Naren had seen across Thailand, this one bore no gold, no color, no ornament, only the weight of time and something heavier, less visible. A ring of wooden posts surrounded it, bound together with faded crimson cloth. The fabric strips were tied in tight knots, layered over each other in hundreds of bindings, some so old they had hardened into brittle cords. Small gold leaf talismans fluttered among them, their sacred inscriptions worn away by weather and touch. Wind did not stir. Yet the cloth trembled faintly. Naren approached the boundary and stopped. A smell drifted from the temple stones, damp earth, old incense, and a faint metallic tang that lingered at the back of his throat. He raised his camera but hesitated. Something about the place resisted being recorded. Beyond the cloth barrier, the ground was dark and compacted, as though pressed down by generations of kneeling bodies. Melted wax had pooled and hardened in thick layers, forming pale drips like frozen tears across the stone steps. He noticed footprints. Not old impressions hardened by time, but fresh ones, edges still sharp in the dust. Bare feet. Small. And larger ones layered over them. A voice came from behind him. No one enters. Naren turned sharply. An older man stood several meters away, his posture rigid, his face unreadable. He wore a plain black shirt and loose trousers tied with a cord at the waist. Around his neck hung a string of wooden prayer beads polished smooth by years of handling. "I am Somchai," the man said, "headman of this village." Naren lowered his camera. "I'm a researcher. I was told this temple is ancient." Somchai's gaze shifted toward the stone structure. For a moment, something like unease flickered across his face before it hardened again. "It is closed." "Why?" A long silence followed. The headman's eyes returned to Naren, steady and unblinking. "Because some doors," he said, "are not meant to be opened from this side." A faint tapping sound echoed from within the temple. Once. Then again. Naren felt the small clay amulet in his pocket press cold against his thigh. "Is someone inside?" he asked. Somchai did not turn toward the sound. "The wind moves old wood," he replied. There was no wind. The tapping stopped. Then, from somewhere deep beneath the stone floor, came a sound so faint Naren might have imagined it, a slow, dragging breath, as if air were being pulled through wet soil. Somchai stepped forward, placing himself between Naren and the boundary cloth. "You should leave this place before night," he said. "The forest does not belong to us after dark." Naren glanced once more at the temple steps. The fresh footprints seemed darker now. As if damp. As if whatever had made them had only just passed through. When he looked up again, Somchai was watching him with an expression that held neither hostility nor welcome, only the strained patience of a man guarding something he feared more than death. As Naren turned to leave, the gold-leaf talismans fluttered softly behind him. Not in the wind, but as though something unseen had brushed past them from the inside. And for a brief moment, he was certain the temple was listening, not to the living village surrounding it, but to something stirring far below the stone. Chapter 4. The drums in the night. Night did not fall over Bansang, it seeped in. The last strands of daylight faded behind the palm forest, and with them vanished the thin illusion that the village belonged to the living. Shadows pooled beneath the stilt houses, thickening until they merged into one continuous darkness. No lamps were lit, no voices carried through the lanes. Even the air seemed to retreat, leaving behind a stillness so complete it pressed against Naren's chest. Inside the small wooden house offered to him for the night, he sat on a woven mat, listening. Nothing. Not insects. Not wind. Not even the distant hum of civilization. He checked his phone again. No signal. The battery indicator flickered between numbers, draining faster than it should. The silence deepened. Then came the first drumbeat. It was low and hollow, like sound carried through wet earth rather than air. Thump. Naren froze. Several seconds passed before the second beat came. Thump. The rhythm was slow, deliberate, not music, not celebration. Each strike seemed spaced to allow the silence to close around it before the next arrived. Thump. The sound did not echo. It absorbed the darkness instead. Naren rose and stepped to the window. Outside, the village remained black and unmoving. Yet he sensed a shift, not movement, but awareness, as though every house had turned its attention toward the same distant point. Thump. The drumbeat came again, this time accompanied by something faint beneath it, a murmur. Low and layered, like voices speaking underwater. He told himself it was a ritual, a village tradition, something harmless misunderstood by outsiders. Still, he found himself opening the door. The night air felt colder than before, damp against his skin. The smell of incense drifted faintly through the dark, fretted with the metallic scent he had noticed near the temple. Another drumbeat rolled through the forest. Thump. This one seemed closer. A door creaked somewhere behind him. Naren turned. Across the lane, a wooden door had opened a narrow slit. A pair of eyes reflected faint light from within, watching. Not curious, not welcoming. The door closed. More drumbeats followed, steady and unhurried, drawing his gaze toward the black outline of the palm forest beyond the last row of houses. Between the trunks, something flickered. A point of orange light. Then another. Torches. They moved slowly, weaving between the trees like drifting embers carried by an unseen current. The murmuring grew clearer, not speech, chanting. The syllables rose and fell in a cadence older than language, vibrating in his ribs rather than reaching his ears. Naren took a step forward. The clay amulet in his pocket felt suddenly cold, as though pressed against ice. The old woman's voice surfaced in his memory. When the drums begin, do not follow them. Another beat. Thumb. The torches paused deep in the forest, hovering in the dark like watchful eyes. The chanting stopped. Silence rushed back in. Naren realized he had been holding his breath. Then, from the darkness between the trees, came a sound that did not belong to drums, chanting, or wind. Something exhaled. Long. Slow. Wet. The torches dimmed, as if swallowed by the forest. Darkness closed over the path. Behind him, the village doors shut one by one. Without hands. Without footsteps. Without sound. Naren stood alone beneath the breathless sky, the echo of the drumbeat still vibrating in his bones. And somewhere beyond the tree line, beneath layers of soil and roots older than memory, something had awakened just enough to listen. Waiting for the next call. Waiting for the promise to be kept.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 5. Footprints in the Mud. Naren did not remember returning inside. He only knew that when he opened his eyes, a thin gray light had begun to seep through the woven bamboo walls. Dawn arrived reluctantly, like something forced into a place where it was not welcome. The drums were gone. The silence remained. He sat upright, his back damp with cold sweat. For several moments he listened, expecting another distant beat, another murmur rising from the forest. Nothing came, only the faint creak of wood adjusting to morning heat. Yet the air still carried that metallic scent, as if the night had left something behind. Naren stepped outside. A pale mist clung low to the ground, curling around the stilts of houses and drifting along the narrow paths. The village looked abandoned, doors shut, shutters closed, no smoke rising from cooking fires. Even the spirit shrines seemed neglected, their incense bowls filled with ash undisturbed by fresh offerings. He began walking toward the edge of the village, drawn by a quiet certainty he could not explain. The path sloped gently downward, leading to the darker soil near the forest boundary where runoff collected after rains. The earth there was soft and marked. At first he thought the impressions were made by livestock, but Ban Sang had no buffalo, no cattle, no tethered animals anywhere in sight. He crouched. The nearest print was deep, pressed into the mud with unnatural force. It resembled a human footprint in structure, heel, arch, toe impressions, yet elongated. The toes stretched and narrow, ending in sharp points rather than rounded tips. Claw marks. The mud within the print was still wet. He glanced along the ground. There were dozens of them. Some partially filled with seeped water, others newly formed, edges sharp and dark. They overlapped and circled as though whatever had made them had lingered here. Shifting its weight, turning slowly. Watching. A chill crept up his spine. Naren stood and followed the trail. The prints led toward the tree line, where the mist thickened into a low, pale veil clinging between the trunks. The forest smelled different in daylight, damp rot, crushed leaves, and something faintly sweet beneath the decay. The deeper he walked, the quieter it became. Even his own footsteps seemed absorbed by the soft earth. The prints continued. Deeper. Larger. As if the weight of the creature increased with each step. Then he saw it. A clearing no wider than a small courtyard opened between the palms. At its center stood a flat stone slab, waist high, its surface darkened in irregular stains that the morning mist could not soften. Flies hovered above it in a slow, lazy spiral. Naren approached carefully. The smell hit him first, iron, decay, and the sour sweetness of old blood soaked deep into porous stone. Dried streaks ran along the slab's edges, hardened in thick layers from years, perhaps decades, of repetition. Melted candle wax clung to the sides like pale drips of bone. Something lay at the base of the stone. He forced himself closer. A woven cord. Frayed. Darkened. Stiff. Nearby, half buried in mud, rested a small wooden bead threaded with black string, identical to the prayer beads worn by the headman. The mist shifted. From somewhere beyond the clearing came a faint rustling, not the movement of leaves, but the slow drag of something heavy brushing against the forest floor. Naren straightened, heart pounding. The sound stopped. The forest held its breath. He became suddenly aware that the footprints did not lead away from the stone. They circled it, then turned back toward the village. A soft drop of moisture struck his hand. He looked up. The canopy above was still. Another drop fell. Dark. Thick. It spread slowly across his skin before sliding toward his wrist. Naren wiped it away instinctively. The smear it left behind was brown-black. Not water. Behind him, somewhere between the trees, a branch snapped. He turned. Nothing moved. Yet the silence no longer felt empty. It felt occupied. And as he stepped backward out of the clearing, he had the overwhelming sensation that something just beyond the veil of mist had shifted its weight, adjusting its stance. As if deciding whether to follow. He did not stop walking until the houses of Ban Sang came back into view. Only then did he realize the metallic scent in the air was stronger. And drifting from somewhere within the village, faint but unmistakable, came the smell of fresh incense. As though preparations had already begun for the coming night. Chapter 6. The Buried Story. By midday, Ban Sang stirred, not with life, but with movement carefully measured and quickly withdrawn. Doors opened just enough for hands to set bowls outside. Figures crossed lanes without lifting their eyes. No one lingered. No one spoke. If the village had a voice, it had learned long ago to whisper only behind closed walls. Naren sat beneath the shade of a leaning palm near the well. Reviewing the photographs he had taken, the images looked flatter than what he had seen with his own eyes. The temple stones appeared ordinary. The forest clearing seemed smaller. Almost harmless. Yet one image would not display. A blank frame. Taken, according to the timestamp, at the stone slab. He tried again. The screen flickered and froze before returning to the previous image. A dry chuckle sounded nearby. You will not carry that place away in a machine. Naren looked up. An old man sat cross-legged in the dust several meters away. His skin was darkened and deeply creased. His thin shoulders draped in a faded monk's robe long since stained by weather and travel. His head was shaved, but gray stubble had begun to grow unevenly across his scalp. Naren had not seen him approach. "You are a monk?" Naren asked. "Once," the man replied. "Now I am only someone who stayed too long." His eyes drifted toward the forest edge before returning to Naren. "You walked where the ground remembers," he said. Naren hesitated, then nodded. "I found the stone." The old man closed his eyes briefly, as though confirming something he had hoped was untrue. For a while they sat in silence. A thin wind moved through the palms, carrying the dry rustle of fronds overhead. Finally, Naren spoke. "What happened here?" The man drew a slow breath. "Before the roads, before the government-marked borders, before the drought that broke the land." His voice was quiet, but the air seemed to hold it carefully. There was a season when the rains did not come. The wells emptied. The rice died standing in the fields. Children stopped crying because they no longer had strength. His fingers tightened slightly on his robe. They prayed to the Buddha, to the forest spirits, to ancestors. Nothing answered. The wind shifted. The metallic scent drifted faintly through the air. Then a stranger arrived. The old man continued, a ritualist from the deep provinces, a man who spoke of older powers. He said the forest was not empty. It was patient. Naren felt the clay amulet in his pocket grow cold again. He taught them a ceremony. The man said, an offering to the one beneath the roots. A gift of life to awaken the soil and call the rain. "And it worked?" Naren asked. The old man's gaze hardened. That night the sky broke open. Rain fell until the river swelled and the wells filled. The rice grew tall again. He paused. But something else rose with the water. The silence between them deepened. At first, he said, the offerings were animals, chickens, goats, buffalo taken into the forest. The rains continued. The harvest returned. His voice grew thinner. Then the drought came back. Naren felt a tightening in his chest. He already knew what came next. The ritualist told them the forest had tasted life. The old man whispered, and life must answer life. A door creaked somewhere behind them. No voices followed. They chose from among the families. He continued, one child, once each generation, given beneath the roots so the land would not die again. Naren stared at him, and no one stopped it? Some tried. The man's eyes flickered toward the sealed temple. The first time a father refused. The rains stopped for 3 years. The river rotted. Fish floated to the surface with their bellies split. Crops blackened in the fields. His voice dropped to a breath. And something walked at the forest edge at night. A chill slid through Naren's spine. So they kept the promise, he said. The old man nodded slowly. Promises made to the living can be broken. Promissory words spoken to what waits beneath the earth. He shook his head faintly. Do not forget. The sound of a wooden shutter slamming echoed across the village. Both men turned instinctively toward the forest. Naren swallowed. What is it? The old man's expression hollowed. No one alive has seen its full shape and remained in the light long enough to speak clearly of it. He said. A long pause followed. Then, very softly. But the ground remembers its weight. A distant thud echoed faintly from the direction of the trees. Not a drum. Not yet. The old man began to rise, joints trembling with the effort. You should leave before the moon thins, he said. The nights ahead will not belong to those who choose to stay. He turned and walked away, his steps slow but unwavering. Naren watched him disappear between the houses. In the stillness that followed, he became aware of something new, a faint, rhythmic creaking from beneath the wooden lid of the well. As if the rope securing it had tightened. Or something below had shifted its weight. The metallic scent in the air grew stronger. And from somewhere in the village, incense began to burn again. Preparing. Remembering. Waiting.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 7. The Chosen Child. The village changed after sunset. It did not become louder or more alive. Instead, band sang grew tense, as if every wall, every wooden beam, every woven panel had tightened in anticipation of something inevitable. By late afternoon, Naren noticed small preparations unfolding in silence. Women washed doorsteps with buckets of cloudy water infused with crushed leaves. Men reinforced spirit shrines with fresh incense and strips of red cloth. Bowls of rice were replaced with new offerings, though no one ate. Children were nowhere to be seen. Even the dogs had vanished. The sky dimmed behind a veil of thin cloud, muting the light into a gray that never fully became evening. Naren followed a narrow path along the edge of the village and stopped when he heard a sound that did not belong to ritual preparation. Soft sobbing. He found the woman seated on the wooden threshold of a stilt house, leaning slightly to one side. Her hair hung loose and uncombed down her back, and her fingers gripped the edge of the doorway so tightly her knuckles shone pale. She did not look up as he approached. Her voice was a whisper scraped raw. They came at dawn. Naren hesitated. Who? She swallowed, her shoulders trembling. The headman, the elders, the monk. Her grip tightened. They brought the red cloth. The words seemed to pull the air from the space between them. Naren felt the clay amulet in his pocket grow cold. What happened? He asked quietly. At last she lifted her face. Her eyes were swollen and rimmed in red, yet eerily dry, as though her tears had already been spent long before he arrived. They marked my daughter's door, she said. The metallic scent in the air sharpened. Naren's chest tightened. Marked? Her hand lifted weakly and pointed toward the frame beside her. There, just above eye level, a streak of red pigment had been smeared into the shape of a narrow vertical line. It had dried unevenly, cracking like old blood. She is chosen, the woman whispered. A dull ringing filled Naren's ears. No one protested? He asked. A hollow sound escaped her throat, not laughter. Not grief. When the drought came, my grandmother gave her brother. She said, when the fever came, my mother's cousin was taken. When the river turned black, my aunt's child went into the forest. Her fingers loosened from the doorway and fell into her lap. We are a family that has already refused once. The air seemed to grow colder. And what happened? Naren asked. She stared past him, toward the distant palm line. The rains did not return for 2 seasons. She said, buffalo died standing in the fields. The well water smelled of rot. Her voice dropped to a brittle whisper. And something walked along the edge of the houses at night. A faint wind moved through the stilts beneath the house, producing a low, hollow tone. Where is your daughter now? Naren asked. The woman's lips parted, but no sound emerged. Instead, she slowly turned her head toward the dark interior behind her. Naren followed her gaze. Inside the house, the shadows felt thick, layered, as if darkness had gathered there over many years. For a moment he saw nothing. Then 2 small eyes reflected the gray light. A child stepped forward. She could not have been more than 8. Her hair had been combed neatly, parted and tied with a faded ribbon. Around her neck hung a thread cord bearing a tiny clay charm identical to the amulet in Naren's pocket. She did not look frightened. She looked quiet, as if she had been told a truth too large to resist. Her name is Molly, the mother said. The girl's gaze rested on Naren, calm and unreadable. Do you know where they will take you tonight? He asked gently. She nodded. To the place where the roots drink, she said. Her voice was soft, but steady. The metallic taste returned to the back of Naren's throat. Are you afraid? He asked. Molly tilted her head slightly, as though considering the question for the first time. My grandmother says the forest keeps the rain for us. She replied, if I go, the rice will grow tall again. Behind her, the darkness inside the house seemed to deepen. The mother made a broken sound and turned her face away. From somewhere far beyond the houses, deep in the palm forest, a single dull drumbeat rolled through the thickening dusk. Thump. Molly did not flinch. But the woman beside the door began to tremble uncontrollably. Another beat followed. Thump. Naren felt the vibration in his ribs. Doors along the lane began closing. One by one. Without voices. Without farewell. The girl stepped backward into the house. The shadows swallowed her small figure. The mother pressed her forehead to the wooden threshold, whispering words too faint to hear. As Naren stepped away, the smell of fresh incense drifted through the air, stronger now, layered over the metallic scent of something older. Behind him, the red mark beside the doorway seemed darker than before, as if still wet. And from the direction of the forest, the drums began again. Slow. Patient. Unavoidable. Chapter 8. The Temple Walls. The drums did not stop. They faded into the distance as night thickened, yet their slow rhythm lingered inside Naren's chest long after the sound itself dissolved into the dark. He did not remember deciding to return to the temple. Only that his feet carried him there while the last traces of dusk drained from the sky. Ban Sang had sealed itself indoors. No lanterns burned, no footsteps crossed the lanes. The village seemed abandoned to the night, or surrendered to it. The black stone temple loomed ahead, darker than the darkness surrounding it. The red cloth bindings around the posts hung motionless, their knots layered like scars. Gold leaf talismans clung to the cords, their sacred scripts worn away by time and touch, leaving only faint impressions like erased prayers. Naren stood at the boundary. The clay amulet in his pocket felt heavy, as though saturated with cold. The air around the temple carried a smell stronger than before, damp earth, stale incense, and the unmistakable sweetness of rot sealed too long beneath stone. A faint sound reached him. Not from the forest. From within. A soft dragging noise, like something shifting slowly across grit. He stepped over the boundary cord. The temperature dropped instantly. The ground beneath his feet felt compacted. dense with years of kneeling bodies and melted wax hardened into pale rivulets along the steps. The temple doors were not locked. They were simply closed. When he pushed them inward, the wood released a long, dry groan that seemed to echo deeper than the structure itself. Darkness pressed against him. The air inside was thick and unmoving, saturated with incense smoke layered over decades. His flashlight beam cut a narrow path through suspended dust that drifted like ash in still air. The walls revealed themselves slowly. Carvings covered every surface, not decorative, not devotional, but narrative. Figures knelt in rows, their bodies bent in submission. Above them towered a horned shape carved in deep, violent strokes, elongated limbs, a torso like a man's, and a head crowned with curved horns that merged into branching roots. Its face had been deliberately gouged away. Repeatedly. As if each generation had tried to erase it. Naren moved closer. The grooves of the carvings were darkened with residue, soot, oil, and something darker embedded deep within the stone. The scenes progressed along the wall like a story told in images. Fields withering beneath a blank sky. Villagers raising bowls toward empty heavens. A figure emerging from beneath the roots. Rain falling in vertical torrents. Then the offerings. Animals first. Then smaller forms, carried in woven cradles. The final panels showed the horned figure rising higher from the ground with each generation. Its form becoming more defined, more complete, as though it were slowly being assembled from the offerings given to it. At the center of the temple floor lay the stone pit. It was wider than Naren expected, a circular opening rimmed with worn grooves carved by rope friction. Melted wax and hardened residue formed thick layers along the rim like rings marking years of repetition. He aimed the light downward. The beam disappeared into darkness. No bottom visible. A faint, moist exhale drifted upward. Naren froze. He listened. Silence. Then, from the depths, a sound like soil shifting against something vast and slow. His pulse thundered in his ears. He stepped back, and his light caught something along the inner walls. Handprints. Hundreds of them. Small. Layered over one another. Pressed into soot and oil. Some smeared downward, as though the hands had slid while gripping the stone edge. A faint whisper brushed the edge of hearing. Not a word. Not a voice. But the soft friction of breath passing through many throats at once. Naren turned sharply. The carvings seemed unchanged. Yet the horned figure's gouged face now appeared deeper in shadow, as if the darkness within the grooves had thickened. From somewhere below, a slow thud vibrated through the stone beneath his boots. Not a drum. Something heavier. Something patient. The flashlight flickered. Once. Twice. Then steadied. The air grew colder. Behind him, the temple doors shifted with a faint wooden creak. He turned toward them instinctively. They remained open. But the darkness beyond them seemed thicker than before, layered. Watchful. Listening. From the pit rose another slow exhale. Wet. Ancient. And threaded with a faint odor of decay long sealed away from light. Naren backed toward the exit, unable to turn his back fully on the opening. As he stepped over the boundary cord and into the night air, he realized the drums had stopped. The silence that replaced them felt heavier than sound. Behind him, inside the temple, something shifted once more beneath the stone. Then became still, as if aware it had been observed, and had chosen, for now, not to rise.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 9. The Woman Without a Shadow. Naren did not return to the house. The temple air still clung to him, the damp rot, the stale incense, the breath rising from depths that should have been sealed forever. Even the night felt different now, as if the darkness carried weight in memory. He walked without direction, drawn toward the outer edge of the village where the last houses leaned away from the palm forest like men unwilling to stand too close to a grave. The silence had changed. It was no longer empty. It was listening. The sky above held no stars. A thin veil of cloud smothered the moon, turning the night into a flat expanse of dim gray. Shapes dissolved at the edges. Distance became uncertain. He realized he could no longer hear his own footsteps. The soil beneath him absorbed sound completely. Then he saw her. She stood between two palm trunks at the edge of the tree line. Dressed in white cloth that hung straight to her ankles. Unmoving despite the faint stir of air through the fronds above. Her long black hair fell forward, obscuring part of her face. She did not appear suddenly. She was simply there, as though she had always been standing in that exact place. Waiting for him to notice. Naren stopped. "Hello?" he called. His voice seemed to travel only a short distance before dissolving into the thick night air. The woman did not move. A faint smell drifted toward him, damp earth and something faintly sweet. Like wilted flowers left too long in stagnant water. He stepped closer. The clay amulet in his pocket grew cold against his thigh. The woman lifted her head. Her face was pale, almost luminous in the low light, her features delicate yet strained, as if sorrow had stretched them thin over many years. Her eyes were wide and dark, reflecting no light. "Have you seen my child?" she asked. Her voice was soft, but wrong, flattened, as though the words had been pressed through soil before reaching his ears. Naren swallowed. "No, I haven't." She studied his face carefully, as though comparing it against a memory. "They said the forest would keep her safe." She whispered. "They said she would feed the rain." A slow chill spread through his arms. "When did she disappear?" he asked. The woman's gaze drifted past him, toward the silent houses of Ban Sang. "The drums called," she said. A pause. "They took her before the moon rose." Her eyes returned to him. "She was smaller than your shadow." The air seemed to thicken. Naren became aware of something strange at the edge of his vision. He glanced downward instinctively. The ground beneath the woman's feet lay pale in the dim light. But no shadow stretched from her form. The cloud-veiled moon cast faint outlines from the palm trunks, from his own body, from the slanted posts of nearby houses. She alone cast nothing. His breath caught. The woman took a slow step forward. The soil did not shift beneath her weight. "Have you heard her crying?" she asked. Naren could not speak. The faint smell of stagnant water grew stronger. "She was afraid of the dark." The woman continued. "She used to hold my sleeve when the lamps went out." Her voice faltered. "Now the dark holds her." A faint sound reached them from within the forest. Not a drum. Not wind. A soft, distant whimper. Naren's heart lurched. The woman's head tilted slightly. Listening. "You hear it," she whispered. Another faint cry drifted between the trees. Thin and fragile, as if carried through layers of damp soil. Naren took an involuntary step toward the forest. The old woman's warning flashed through his mind. "If you hear someone calling your name from the forest, you must not answer." The clay amulet pressed icy against his skin. The woman's expression softened, relief spreading across her pale face. "She is not alone," she murmured. "You will bring her back." She reached toward him. Her fingers stopped just short of his arm. The air between them turned sharply cold. Naren forced himself to step backward. "I can't," he said hoarsely. The woman's expression did not change. But something in her eyes emptied. The faint crying ceased. The silence rushed back in. A slow breath moved through the forest, bending the palm fronds in a direction opposite the wind. Naren blinked. The woman was gone. No retreating footsteps. No rustle of fabric. Only the empty space between the trees. He looked down. The soil where she had stood remained smooth and undisturbed. But near the edge of the tree line, faint impressions marked the ground, small footprints, overlapping, leading toward the deeper forest. As if many children had passed that way. Behind him, somewhere in the village, a door slammed shut. The echo rolled through the night. And from far beneath the earth, too deep to be called sound, something shifted. Listening. Waiting. For the next voice that answered the dark. Chapter 10. The Night of the Offering. The drums returned just before midnight. Not suddenly, but slowly. Like a pulse finding its rhythm beneath the skin of the earth. Thump. Naren felt the vibration through the soles of his feet before he fully heard it. The sound seemed to rise from the soil itself rather than travel through the air. He stood at the edge of the village, staring toward the palm forest where darkness layered thick between the trunks. Another beat followed. Thump. A door opened behind him. Then another. No voices called. No lamps were lit. Figures emerged silently from the houses of Ban Sang, dressed in black cloth that absorbed what little light remained in the night. Their movements were slow, deliberate, emptied of hesitation. No one acknowledged him. No one spoke. They moved as one body toward the forest path. The smell of incense thickened, carried on air that felt damp and cold against his skin. Beneath it lingered the metallic tang he now associated with the stone slab in the clearing. Naren followed. He did not remember choosing to. The clay amulet pressed like ice against his thigh. The drums continued. Thump. Thump. The deeper they walked into the forest, the more the world behind them dissolved. The village lights, if any had existed, were gone. The trees rose like pillars of a buried cathedral, their crowns sealing off the sky. Torches burned ahead, their flames wavering low and orange, casting light that did not fully push back the darkness. The chanting began as a murmur. Low. Layered. Voices blending into a cadence older than any prayer Naren recognized. The syllables seemed to vibrate in his chest rather than reach his ears, resonating through bone and breath. They entered the clearing. The stone slab stood at its center, darkened by generations of offerings. Melted wax glistened along its edges. The air smelled thick with resin smoke, iron, and damp soil freshly turned. Villagers formed a circle around the clearing, kneeling in the mud without being told. At the far edge stood the headman, Somchai, his face carved into rigid calm. Beside him, the old monk gripped a bundle of incense so tightly the sticks snapped softly under his fingers. Then the chanting ceased. The silence that followed was complete. Two elders stepped forward carrying a woven bamboo cage. Inside, a small figure sat unmoving. Molly. Her hands rested quietly in her lap. A thread cord circled her neck. The clay charm lay against her chest. Her eyes were open. She did not cry. The mother was not present. The cage was placed beside the stone slab. Naren's throat tightened. He took a step forward, and felt a hand seize his arm. It was the old monk. His grip trembled, but did not loosen. If you break the circle, the man whispered, the forest will claim more than one. The drums stopped. The silence deepened until Naren could hear the faint crackle of torch resin burning. Somchai lifted a carved wooden staff and struck its base once against the earth. A low response shuddered through the ground beneath them. Not an echo. An answer. The chanting resumed, louder now, rising in slow waves that pressed against the clearing like gathering water. The elders opened the cage. Molly stepped out without resistance. The mud did not cling to her feet. Two women wrapped a strip of red cloth around her wrists, not binding, but marking. The chanting intensified. The air grew heavier. Naren realized he could no longer feel the breeze. Even the torch flames leaned inward, as if drawn toward the stone. Molly was lifted gently and placed upon the slab. She looked up at the canopy of black leaves above. Her lips moved. Naren could not hear the words. The old monk's fingers tightened painfully around Naren's arm. Do not listen, he breathed. The soil beneath the stone emitted a faint cracking sound. The chanting faltered, then deepened. From beneath the slab came a slow, wet exhale. The torches flickered violently. Some villagers began to tremble. Somchai raised his staff again, striking the earth. A low vibration rolled outward through the mud, through bone, through breath. The ground near the slab shifted. Not much. Only a slight settling, as if something vast had adjusted its weight beneath layers of soil and roots. The metallic scent flooded the clearing. Molly's eyes closed. The chanting reached a fevered pitch. And from somewhere deep below, deeper than sound, deeper than memory, came a low, resonant movement, like something turning in its sleep after a long, patient wait. Naren realized with cold certainty. This was not a ritual of summoning. It was a ritual of appeasement. The earth trembled again. And the night held its breath.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 11. The Thing Beneath the Roots. The chanting faltered. Not because the villagers lost rhythm, but because something beneath the earth responded. The ground shivered once, a subtle tremor that rippled through the mud and into the bones of everyone kneeling in the clearing. Torch flames guttered, shrinking as if the air itself had thinned. Then the soil beside the stone slab split with a wet, fibrous sound. A crack opened no wider than a hand. Darkness bled from it. A low gasp moved through the circle of villagers. Though no one dared lift their heads. Some pressed their foreheads deeper into the mud. Others began whispering prayers that dissolved into the rising chant. Naren could not look away. The fissure widened. Roots surfaced first, thick, pale strands forcing upward through the soil like exposed veins. They writhed slowly, coated in damp earth and rot, twisting against one another as if pushed aside by something larger forcing its way upward. The metallic stench thickened until it coated the back of his throat. The old monk's grip on his arm had become iron. "Do not speak," he rasped. A deep vibration rolled through the ground. Not sound. Mass. Pressure. The soil heaved again. Then something black and slick emerged between the roots. A shape like a hand, but too long, too narrow. The fingers jointed in unnatural angles. Its surface glistened with wet earth and a viscous sheen that caught the torchlight in dull reflections. Each finger ended in a blunt, keratinous edge more like horn than nail. It flexed slowly. Mud slid from its surface in thick ropes. A woman somewhere in the circle stifled a scream that broke into sobbing. The chanting surged louder, frantic now, as if volume alone could hold the thing in place. The hand pressed against the ground. The earth sagged beneath its weight. Another tremor followed. More roots tore free. Something vast shifted below. Molly lay still upon the stone slab, her small form illuminated by wavering torchlight. The red cloth around her wrists fluttered though the air remained unmoving. A wet exhale rose from the fissure. Warm. Rotting. Ancient. Naren's stomach lurched. A second limb forced upward beside the first, dragging with it clotted soil and strands of root that snapped like brittle bone. The ground split wider, revealing a depth filled not with empty space, but packed darkness that seemed to absorb light itself. The villagers pressed their foreheads to the earth. Somchai remained upright, staff planted before him, lips moving in relentless repetition. The old monk whispered, barely audible, "It rises only as far as it is permitted." The hand flexed again, claws pressing into mud, leaving deep impressions that filled instantly with seeped groundwater dark as ink. Then, slowly, a curved structure broke the surface between the writhing roots. A horn. Black. Ridged. Glistening with wet soil. It pushed upward inch by inch, displacing earth with slow, irresistible force. A second horn followed, curving in the opposite direction, framing a space between them where darkness thickened. The torchlight dimmed as if drawn inward. The chanting faltered. From the pit in the temple miles away, or perhaps from directly beneath the clearing, came a low resonance that vibrated through Naren's ribs like a distant, buried bell. The darkness between the horns deepened. For a moment, it appeared hollow. Then something within it shifted. A surface like stretched hide moved beneath layers of mud. A suggestion of a face, unfinished, emerging, retreating, as though form itself resisted being fully seen. Molly's chest rose in a slow breath. Her eyes opened. They did not focus on the villagers. They did not focus on the sky. They looked downward, toward the widening fissure. The ground convulsed once more. The hand tightened. Mud surged. The horns lifted higher. The air grew thick and hot, carrying the smell of deep rot and something older than decay, the scent of long-sealed earth disturbed after centuries of burial. Naren felt the urge to run rise like fire in his veins. He did not move. No one moved. The thing beneath the roots did not emerge fully. It did not need to. Its presence alone pressed against the clearing, vast and patient, as if testing the boundary between below and above. The chanting slowed. Lower. Measured. Appeasing. The horned shape ceased rising. The hand relaxed. The soil settled slightly, as if the earth itself exhaled in relief. But the fissure remained open. Waiting. Breathing. And in the mud around the slab, small impressions appeared one by one, tiny handprints pressing upward from beneath the surface. As if something below had reached toward the warmth of the living. Naren's pulse thundered. He understood now with a certainty colder than fear. This was not awakening. This was feeding. And the night was not yet finished. Chapter 12. The price beneath the soil. The fissure did not close. It breathed. Each slow exhale released a warm, damp vapor that carried the scent of rot, iron, and something older, the smell of soil long sealed away from air and memory. The clearing seemed to tilt toward the opening, as if gravity itself had shifted to favor the depth below. The chanting softened but did not stop. It changed in tone, descending into a low, rhythmic murmur that resembled a lullaby sung through cracked throats. Appeasing. Soothing. Begging. Molly remained upon the stone slab, her small body illuminated by trembling torchlight. Her eyes stayed open, fixed downward into the darkness between the horns that protruded from the split earth. The horned shape no longer rose. But it had not retreated. It waited. The mud surrounding the slab trembled. Naren saw it first as movement beneath the surface, subtle ripples disturbing the thin film of water pooled around the stone. Then small bulges formed, pressing upward as if the earth itself were blistering. A handprint surfaced. Tiny. 5 small impressions pushing from below before collapsing inward. Another appeared beside it. Then another. A murmur spread through the kneeling villagers. Some began to rock back and forth, their whispered prayers dissolving into soft sobs. The old monk's grip on Naren loosened slightly, but his hand did not fall away. They do not sleep, he whispered. They wait. The mud broke. Small fingers emerged, coated in black soil, grasping weakly at the surface before sinking back down. A moment later, another set reached upward nearby, smaller still, skeletal beneath a thin sheath of skin. Naren's breath caught in his throat. All around the slab, the ground pulsed with reaching shapes. The chanting grew louder, strained now, as if the voices struggled to maintain control over what pressed upward from below. A faint sound rose from the fissure. Not the deep resonance of the thing beneath. Higher. Thin. Layered. Whispers overlapping whispers. Crying. The sound of many children trying not to cry aloud. The air grew colder despite the warm vapor rising from the earth. Torch flames shrank and bent inward, drawn toward the opening. Molly's lips parted. A soft breath escaped her. "I am not alone," she murmured. The old monk shut his eyes tightly. "Do not answer them," he whispered, though Naren could not tell whether the warning was meant for himself, the villagers, or the child on the stone. The mud split again near the slab. This time, a small face surfaced. Not fully. Only the curve of a cheek and the hollow outline of an eye socket before the soil collapsed inward, swallowing the shape as if it had never been there. A villager cried out and pressed both hands over his ears. Samchai struck his staff against the ground. Once. The vibration rolled outward through the clearing. The reaching shapes faltered. The whispers dimmed. The horned silhouette between the roots shifted slightly, and the ground responded like a held breath. The old monk's voice trembled. "They are the ones who were given," he said. "The forest keeps nothing, it returns everything." The words seemed to sink into the soil itself. Naren stared at the small impressions forming and dissolving in the mud. Understanding pressing against his mind like a rising tide. "They never left," he whispered. "No," the monk replied. "They were never meant to." The chanting slowed again, the rhythm settling into something measured and deliberate. The reaching hands receded. The mud smoothed. The whispers sank back into the depths. But the fissure remained open, exhaling faint warmth like the breath of something slumbering just beneath the threshold of waking. Molly closed her eyes. Her chest rose and fell in a slow, steady rhythm. The horned shape did not rise further. Nor did it retreat. It lingered at the boundary between below and above, as though listening to the silence left behind. One by one, the villagers lowered their foreheads to the mud. The chanting faded to a final whisper. The torches dimmed. The warm vapor thinned. The small handprints vanished beneath settling earth. Yet the metallic scent remained, heavy and inescapable. Naren realized the offering was not a moment. It was an exchange. A balancing. A debt measured not in blood alone, but in memory, in the weight of lives pressed into soil generation after generation. The fissure exhaled once more. Slow. Patient. And then, though it did not close, the ground stilled. Around the clearing, the forest resumed its breath. But beneath the earth, something remained awake, waiting for the promise to be completed, waiting for the night to finish what it had begun.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 13. When the earth refuses the dead. For several long moments, the clearing remained still. The chanting had faded into silence. The torch flames steadied, though their light seemed weaker, as if the darkness around them had thickened beyond the reach of fire. Molly lay upon the stone slab, her breathing slow and shallow, the red cloth at her wrists darkened by damp air. The fissure beside the slab continued to exhale faint warmth, carrying the scent of iron and long-buried decay. Nothing moved. Nothing rose. The villagers remained kneeling, foreheads pressed to the mud, waiting for the unseen signal that would complete the offering. Sanchai did not lower his staff. The old monk's grip trembled against Naren's sleeve. The balance must close, he whispered, or it will remain open. Naren did not understand. Then Molly stirred. Her fingers twitched against the stone. A faint sound escaped her throat, not a cry, not a word, but the thin breath of someone surfacing from deep water. Her eyes opened. They did not look downward into the fissure. They looked at Naren. Something in his chest constricted. Around the clearing, a murmur spread through the kneeling villagers. Some lifted their heads in confusion. Others began whispering prayers with renewed urgency. Sanchai struck his staff against the earth. Once. The ground did not respond. He struck again. The vibration that followed was thin, brittle, like sound traveling through cracked bone. The fissure exhaled sharply. Then inhaled. The mud surrounding it drew inward with a soft sucking sound, as though the earth itself were attempting to reclaim something that refused to descend. Molly's chest rose in a sharp breath. Her lips parted. "I am cold," she whispered. The old monk shut his eyes. The chanting resumed abruptly, louder, strained, desperate. The air thickened. But the ground did not settle. Instead, a low tremor spread outward from the fissure, rippling through the clearing and into the treeline. Torch flames bent sideways, nearly extinguished by a wind that did not touch the leaves above. The horned shape between the roots shifted. Not upward. Forward. Mud slid from the ridged surface of one horn as it tilted slightly, testing the boundary of the opening. A sound rose from below, deeper than before, threaded with a resonance that vibrated through Naren's ribs and teeth. Not hunger. Not anger. Recognition. The mud near the slab began to swell again. Small handprints pressed upward from beneath the surface, appearing faster now, overlapping in frantic succession. Tiny fingers broke through the soil before collapsing back into the earth. The whispers returned. No longer faint. Layered voices, thin with longing, rising in uneven breaths. Cold. Mother. Dark. Several villagers cried out and covered their ears. Sanchai struck the ground again and again, his staff blows cracking the mud but failing to produce the deep answering vibration from below. "The offering must close," he shouted, his voice breaking for the first time. Molly turned her head slowly. Her gaze drifted toward the fissure. "I don't want to go," she whispered. The words struck the clearing like a stone dropped into still water. The chanting faltered. The earth convulsed. The horned shape surged upward several inches, displacing mud in thick, wet folds. Roots snapped with sharp, fibrous cracks as pressure built beneath the soil. The fissure widened. Darkness spilled outward like ink released into water. Narin's pulse roared in his ears. The old monk's voice broke into a hoarse whisper. It refuses, it refuses. The ground around the slab sagged as if the soil had softened into liquid. The small reaching hands multiplied, pushing upward in desperate waves before collapsing into mud that no longer held its shape. The whispers rose into thin, overlapping cries. Torch flames shrank to blue-edged tongues. The forest beyond the clearing remained motionless, as if unwilling to witness what pressed toward the surface. Molly's fingers curled weakly against the stone. "I want my mother," she said. The horned shape thrust upward another inch. The air filled with the smell of ruptured earth and long-sealed rot. Somchai staggered, striking the ground with failing strength. "If the balance breaks," the monk gasped, "it will walk." The words seemed to still the clearing. Even the whispers faltered. Naren stared at the child on the stone, at the mud breaking open around her, at the dark space between the horns where shapes struggled toward form. In that moment he understood. The ritual had never been about killing. It was about surrender. And the earth would not accept what resisted being given. The fisher inhaled sharply. The ground convulsed. The horned shape pushed forward once more. And beneath the trembling soil, something vast shifted its weight, no longer patient, no longer waiting, but pressing upward against the fragile boundary that held it below. The night had not yet reached its end. But the earth had begun to refuse the dead. Chapter 14. The blood that seals the promise. The earth heaved again. The fissure widened with a wet tearing sound, its edges collapsing into mud that no longer held shape. Darkness pooled within the opening, thick and lightless, swallowing the glow of torches that flickered weakly around the clearing. The horned shape surged upward another inch. Roots snapped and recoiled like severed veins. The whispers of children rose into thin, overlapping cries that scraped along the inside of Narin's skull. "Cold? Mother? Don't leave." Molly's small fingers tightened against the stone slab. "I don't want to go," she whispered again. The words shattered what remained of the chant. Several villagers collapsed fully into the mud, sobbing. Others rocked back and forth, pressing their palms into the earth as if trying to hold it closed. Somchai staggered forward, striking the ground with his staff. The blow produced only a dull crack. No answering vibration came. The old monk's voice trembled beside Naren. "The promise is not sealed," he rasped. "The earth will not close." The horned silhouette pressed higher, displacing soil in thick folds. Between the ridged horns, darkness shifted, straining toward form, a surface like stretched hide flexing beneath layers of mud and root. The air grew hot and fetid, heavy with the stench of ruptured earth and long-buried rot. The fisher inhaled sharply. The mud around the slab liquefied, sagging inward. Small skeletal hands broke through the surface in frantic succession, clawing upward before dissolving back into the collapsing soil. The whispers became cries. Somchai's voice broke into a shout. "It will walk if the promise breaks." The old monk released Narin's sleeve and fell to his knees, bowing toward the fisher. "Life must answer life," he whispered. Naren stared at Molly. Her eyes, wide and wet, searched the darkness beyond the ring of villagers. "I want my mother," she said. Something inside him fractured. The clay amulet in his pocket burned cold against his skin. This was never sacrifice alone. It was consent. The earth would not take what resisted. The horned shape thrust upward again. Mud cascaded from its ridged surface. A deep resonance rolled through the clearing, not a sound, but pressure, vast and suffocating. The boundary was breaking. Naren stepped forward. Several villagers gasped. Somchai turned toward him, eyes wide with terror. "If you break the circle." "The circle is already broken," Naren said. He reached the slab. Molly's small hand trembled in the torchlight. He did not lift her. He did not bind her. He knelt beside the stone and took the ritual blade lying among the offerings, its metal darkened by generations of use. The old monk's whisper trembled in the air. "Blood seals what words cannot." Naren pressed the blade across his own palm. The cut opened instantly. Blood welled, dark and bright in the wavering light. A collective gasp rippled through the clearing. He placed his bleeding hand against the stone beside Molly. Warm blood spread across the cold surface, flowing into ancient grooves worn deep by years of offerings. For one suspended moment, nothing happened. Then the earth answered. The fissure exhaled violently. A deep resonance surged upward through the ground, shaking mud from roots and extinguishing half the torches in a single breath. The horned shape halted. The darkness between the horns stilled. The reaching hands froze beneath the surface of the mud, their outlines suspended like impressions in wax. The cries dissolved into silence. Warm vapor rushed upward, carrying the scent of wet soil after rain. The ground shuddered once more, then began to settle. Mud slid inward, slowly filling the fissure's edges. Roots relaxed, sinking back into softened earth. The horned ridges lowered by degrees, receding into darkness as though drawn downward by a force older than gravity. The pressure in the air eased. The metallic stench faded, replaced by the faint scent of damp soil and extinguished incense. Molly's breathing steadied. Her small fingers loosened. The red cloth at her wrists fell slack. Somchai dropped to his knees, forehead striking the mud. The villagers followed, their bodies collapsing forward in exhausted relief. The old monk began to weep silently. Naren remained kneeling beside the slab, his blood mingling with the dark grooves carved by generations before him. The fissure did not close completely, but it no longer breathed. It rested. The forest exhaled. A faint wind moved through the palms for the first time that night. Ash drifted from the torches. And far above the canopy, the hidden moon slipped free of cloud, casting a pale, fragile light over the clearing. The promise had been sealed. Not by death, but by blood freely given. Yet as the last tremors faded into the soil, Naren felt the cold imprint of the amulet against his skin, and understood with quiet dread that promises sealed in blood are never erased. They are inherited, and the earth remembers every name.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 15. The Mark of the Next Keeper. Dawn arrived without birdsong. A pale gray light seeped through the palms, spreading slowly across the clearing where the earth still lay dark and damp from the night's upheaval. The torches had burned down to blackened stubs. Ash drifted in thin veils across the mud, settling into footprints and grooves carved by generations of kneeling bodies. The fissure remained. No longer breathing. No longer widening. A narrow seam in the soil, dark and quiet, as though the ground had closed one eye while keeping the other half open. The villagers rose stiffly, their movements slow with exhaustion. No one spoke. Faces streaked with mud and tears remained lowered as they gathered the ritual objects in silence. Somchai oversaw the clearing with hollow eyes. The old monk sat near the stone slab, fingers trembling over his prayer beads, lips moving in a prayer too quiet to be heard. Molly slept in her mother's arms. Her face looked smaller in daylight, younger, ordinary. The red cloth had been removed from her wrists. In its place remained faint impressions on her skin, like shadows of bindings that had never fully tightened. Her mother rocked gently, whispering thanks between breaths. No one looked at Naren. Yet space opened around him wherever he walked. Not avoidance. Recognition. The air smelled different now, damp soil after rain, faint incense, and the distant green scent of wet leaves. Somewhere beyond the tree line, water dripped steadily, as if the forest itself were releasing a long-held breath. By mid-morning, clouds gathered over Ban Sang. Heavy. Pregnant with rain. Naren stood near the well at the center of the village, watching as Somchai approached. The headman stopped a few steps away, his posture rigid but no longer guarded. "You gave what was not yours to give," Somchai said. Naren flexed his bandaged palm. It answered. Somchai studied him for a long moment. "Yes," he said quietly. It answered. The old monk joined them slowly, leaning on a carved stick. His eyes, though exhausted, held a strange clarity. "The earth accepts blood freely given," he murmured, "but it does not forget the hand that offers it." A distant rumble rolled across the sky. Thunder. Naren felt the sound in his ribs. The monk reached into his robe and withdrew a small mirror framed in tarnished metal. Without speaking, he held it up. Naren looked. At first he saw only his own face, pale, drawn, shadowed by sleeplessness. Then he noticed the mark. Just below his collarbone, visible where his shirt hung open. A faint red imprint curved across his skin. Two thin arcs. Like the outline of horns. He stared at it, breath shallow. It will darken with time, the monk said softly, as the promise settles. Rain began as a whisper in the palm leaves. Then it fell. Heavy drops struck the packed earth, releasing the scent of dust and roots and long-buried memory. The villagers did not run for shelter. They stood where they were, letting the rain soak their clothing and wash the mud from their skin. Some wept openly. Some lifted their faces to the sky. Molly stirred in her mother's arms, blinking at the falling water with quiet curiosity. Naren remained motionless as rain soaked through his shirt and into the bandage around his hand. The mark beneath his collarbone tingled faintly, a dull warmth beneath the skin. Beyond the village, the forest darkened under the downpour. Water streamed along the paths, soaking into soil that had waited too long for relief. The old monk turned his gaze toward the tree line. "It sleeps again," he said. Naren followed his gaze. The palms swayed gently under the rain, their fronds whispering together in low, endless motion. Nothing moved between the trunks. Nothing watched from the shadows. Yet the silence beneath the sound of rainfall felt layered, deep. Patient, aware. Somchai stepped closer. "The promise is sealed," he said. "For this generation." Naren met his eyes. "And the next?" Somchai did not answer immediately. Thunder rolled again, closer now. "The earth remembers," he said at last, "and when it remembers, it calls." The rain intensified, blurring the edges of the village, softening the outlines of houses and paths until Ban Sang seemed to dissolve into mist and water. Naren closed his eyes briefly, letting the rain run over his face, into his mouth, down his throat. It tasted of soil, of roots, of something older than the village itself. When he opened his eyes, he thought he saw movement at the forest edge, a pale shape between the trunks. Small and still. A child watching from the rain-dark shadows. He blinked. The shape was gone. Only falling water remained. The mark beneath his skin pulsed once, faint and deep. Thunder rolled overhead. And beneath the rain-soaked earth of Ban Sang, far below roots and stone and memory, something vast shifted in its sleep, not waking, not rising, but settling into a deeper patience. Waiting. For the season when the land would thirst again. Waiting for the hand that would answer when it called. The rain fell without end. And the earth listened. The rains returned. The fields lived. The village endured. But the earth does not forget. Beneath roots and stone, beneath generations of whispered prayers and buried names, something vast continues to listen and to wait. Because promises sealed in blood are never broken, only inherited. And when the land thirsts again, someone will be called to answer.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.